fact that there's a whole lot more to React than we have time to cover in this class. Do remember that the Create React README is awesome. And you can learn a lot about React itself just by trying to figure out how you do some very specific things within Create React app. And again, the React official documentation is fantastic, has lots of great examples, and there are some really, really good tutorials out there. We mentioned, I think at the end of last week, ReactTrainingcom. They have a couple of free ones that are really, really good. If you want to kind of review the basics and or learn about Webpack and stuff, since we completely glossed over that because we're using Create React app, their online course, React Fundamentals, which is free, includes Webpack and stuff, and includes someone else explaining some of the fundamentals a different way. And they're bound to do some things that we just didn't do. And look, they also have a modern JavaScript thing. I can't remember what is and isn't free here. What else is free on here? Do you remember? There's at least one more. I think, let's see. Well, I signed up for the free ones even though I haven't actually done them. Let's see. React Router is also free, and I haven't done it yet, but there is a React Router training if that stuff is unclear. And here's the bonus. This is by the author of React Router. So the stuff he says about React Router should be right because he wrote the dang thing. He doesn't even have to look up in the docs. So that's pretty good stuff. We've mentioned that Redux is something that is widely used for data management instead of actually using state and stuff. It's a totally different way of doing it that we just won't even begin to cover. But it's cool. You may end up liking it better, but it is definitely a different concept. There is LearnRedux.com, which is free by Wes Boss, who did JavaScript 30 and some other stuff. And it's pretty dang thorough. You build an Instagram clone that looks pretty decent. So that's a pretty good intro to Redux. There's also a big fat page of links on a GitHub page that we will put in the notes for today that has tons of links with good descriptions of what they all do. So keep in mind, now that you know a little bit of React and quite a bit of JavaScript, if you don't practice, if you stop building things with this a year from now, you will not remember how to do any of it. So keep doing things, build stuff on the side, build yourself a personal site, build silly little apps that do things, or build awesome apps. But you need to keep it up, keep working, and the best thing you can learn in a boot camp, and I think Seth said something pretty close to this on the first day, learn how to learn things quickly, programming languages. If you learn how to learn programming languages, then hopefully you'll be able to sort of maintain your, what's that? Yeah, maintain your relevance. Because guess what? React isn't going to be exactly the same a year from now as it is now either. So it's good to be able to figure out what's changed. I like some newsletters. How I keep up with stuff. Yeah, go ahead.
You don't know JS?
Yeah. You don't know. Okay. Yeah.
I actually stumbled across this one as I was looking to find resources for continued learning, and I started reading it. There's 6 books, but they're honestly not super long. Really well written, really clear. I'm about halfway through so far, and this is probably one of the best things I've read to really give you a solid understanding of how JavaScript is actually working. So all the things like really understanding at a deep level how this binding works, object prototypes, what scope is. So you really understand those things and don't get surprised by some behaviors that might not be what you would expect. So really good series, highly recommended. The online versions are completely free. I got a link for those in the notes today. If you want print books, you can buy them, but the online version is completely free, and I would highly recommend this.
For the sake of the recording with the microphone, the online versions of these books are free. They're short, and they do a really good job of explaining the inner workings of JavaScript. Seth likes them. I haven't read them yet, but I intend to. I think they might be HTML.
Yeah, I just been reading them on this is a GitHub thing, so I've just been reading them in GitHub. To be honest.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, Markdown. This is just a Markdown version. Yeah. So, yeah, that's pretty cool. I subscribe to JavaScript Weekly, which is a newsletter. You can find it at javascriptweekly.com. I don't always have time to read the whole thing, but I at least glance at the headlines, and this is part of how I find out things like, V8, that's Chrome's JavaScript engine. 6.0 now in beta. That's coming soon, and I know some things that it's going to do that the old version didn't, like support object spreads in addition to array spreads, which we were using throughout. Not supported in the browser yet, but it will be pretty soon. What's new with Node 8 and NPM 5? Stuff like that. We don't know Node in here, but we know NPM to a degree. Learn about things like Preact. And just see things like OMG, React just got updated and everything's totally different. Here's what you need to know. Lots of tutorials. A lot of times they'll include tutorials that are pretty foundational as well. And tutorials are always marked like that. 19, JavaScript shorthand coding techniques, and it's every week. I do encourage you to do this. I believe is there one for React too? Is there specifically one? I can't remember. Because these people have several other newsletters as well. Yeah, React Status, I thought so. React Status is another newsletter. Weekly roundup of the latest React and React Native links and tutorials. So that's another thing. Besides Redux, React Native is totally a thing. So runs on iOS and Android. You can actually build completely native iOS and Android apps, not web views, real native apps using React. But we're not going to cover that in this course, obviously. But that's another thing that you can explore if you just want to know where to go from here. That's another pretty cool thing.
What's React Native?
React Native is a way to write completely native mobile apps using React. I mean they are just plain apps that you get from the App Store. They're not websites, and they're not even websites wrapped in an app. They're legit mobile apps. So that's another thing you can do with React. Yeah.
Is it like Ionic or Angular?
Well, it's not exactly, because Ionic really, although there's native parts, they're really web views. So it's kind of doing a web browser inside an app. So it's another level closer to the metal, in other words. But it is the same idea, but it's a little different from that. And there are pros and cons to that. The nice thing about Ionic is you can use CSS to make things look right. And we spent the last 7 months doing an Ionic thing, and like it quite a bit. But Angular's a whole other thing from React. But yeah, React Native takes a slightly different approach than Ionic does for building native apps. So I'm a little disappointed that everyone isn't immediately signing up for these newsletters, but I understand you. Right now, you just want a vacation from React and from my voice. Hey, here's another guy with a voice. If you look over your shoulder, that's a Dave Jones back there. That is what the other fretless Dave looks like, the legend himself. So now that we've gotten NoteHerder to a certain state, the next thing we're going to do is story time. So Dave Jones will be a nice prop in these stories because his name gets mentioned a couple times. And this time he's here in time to hear it. Here in time to hear me talk trash.